बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अमरीकी जरीदे इंटरसेप्ट ने कल पाकिस्तान के बारे में एक और बहुत बड़ी, मैं कहूँगा बॉम्बशेल स्टोरी जो है वो पब्लिश कर डाली है। अगर इस स्टोरी को देखें तो ये स्टोरी असल में जो पहले उन्होंने साइफ़र का ट्रांसक्रिप्ट जारी किया था उससे भी बड़ी स्टोरी है। बहुत मेगा स्टोरी है जो ये कहती है इंटरसेप्ट के मुताबिक कि पाकिस्तान ने खुफिया तरीके से यूक्रेन को हथियार बेचे। उनका जो कहना है वो ये है कि पाकिस्तान ने असल में हथियार अमेरिका को बेचे और अमेरिका ने वो हथियार यूक्रेन को पहुंचाए। ये $1 अरब का तकरीबन अरेंजमेंट था। और इसमें जो इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट है वो अपनी स्टोरी में ये कहते हैं कि ये सारा काम अगस्त 2022 का डाटा अगर वो देखें तो उनको नज़र आता है कि 2022 में पाकिस्तान ने जिस तरह का एमुनेशन चाहिए था यूक्रेन को वो धड़ाधड़ बनाना शुरू कर दिया, उसकी प्रोडक्शन तेज़ कर दी। तो जब अगस्त 2022 में इसकी प्रोडक्शन हो रही है तो इसका मतलब ऑर्डर पहले से मिला हुआ था, निगोशिएशंस पहले से हुई थी, तो कम से कम 2 महीने का वक्त तो दरकार होगा इस सारे काम को। तो इसका मतलब है इमरान खान के जाने के फ़ौरन बाद शहबाज शरीफ एंड को ने ये सारा काम जो है वो करना शुरू कर दिया। बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट स्टोरी है। और फिर वो ये कहते हैं कि इस साल मई में डोनाल्ड लू की पाकिस्तानी एम्बेसडर के साथ मुलाकात हुई जिसमें ये तय हुआ कि वो हेल्प करेंगे IMF की डील के अंदर। और जब कोई नहीं सोच रहा था कि पाकिस्तान को IMF की डील मिलेगी, ये इंटरसेप्ट कह रहा है, और उनके जो एडिटर रायन ग्रिम हैं वो कह रहे हैं कि जब सिर्फ $1.5 बिलियन मिलना था तो उस वक्त पाकिस्तान को $3 बिलियन मिले और सब सोच रहे थे कि ये पैसे नहीं मिलेंगे, अचानक से मिले और मिले भी बेहतर डील में। जो टाइप ऑफ लोन था उसको भी इजी कर दिया गया। पाकिस्तान के अंदर शहबाज शरीफ साहब ने इसकी खूब दाद समेटी। अगर आपको याद होगा बाजी मरियम औरंगज़ेब डोडो, मैं उनको डोडो कार्टून कैरेक्टर की वजह से कहता हूँ, बाजी मरियम औरंगज़ेब डोडो जो हैं वो भी वहाँ मौजूद थी। और याद कीजिए कैसे कहा जा रहा था, आपको याद होगा अब फॉर्मर स्पीकर जो हैं मुस्लिम लीग नून के, वो कह रहे थे ये शहरी रहमान साहबा और मरियम औरंगज़ेब की दुआओं की वजह से हुआ है। ये तो अब हमें रायन ग्रिम ने बताया कि कौन सी दुआएं थी। वो कह रहे थे कि आयतुल कुर्सी पढ़ रही थी और दुआएं पढ़ रही थी। अयाज जो साहब थे वो ये फरमा रहे थे, लेकिन आप अब खुद ही देख लीजिए कि ये कौन सी दुआएं थी। वो रायन ग्रिम ने हमें बताई हैं कि ये असल मामला कुछ और चल रहा था और फिर उनके मुताबिक डोनाल्ड लू ने इसके अंदर रोल प्ले किया या कम्युनिकेट किया और फिर IMF को बताया गया, जो IMF ने रिक्वायरमेंट दी थी पाकिस्तान को कि मिनिमम आपके पास $6 अरब होना चाहिए। और पहले पाकिस्तान ने कहा कि ऐसी कोई रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं है। IMF ने ये भांडा फोड़ दिया और IMF ने कहा नहीं, रिक्वायरमेंट है, $6 अरब दिखाएंगे तो आपको पैसे मिलेंगे। फिर पाकिस्तान ने $4 अरब कर्ज लिया इधर उधर से और ये $1 अरब जो हथियारों से मिला था इसको बीच में शामिल किया गया और उससे फिर पाकिस्तान को ये चीज़ मिली। लेकिन इसमें सबसे जो इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ है वो रायन ग्रिम कहते हैं कि इसकी वजह से पाकिस्तान में इलेक्शंस डिले कराने का भी जो इंटरनेशनल अप्रूवल थी वो भी एक किस्म की पाकिस्तान को मिल गई, क्योंकि वो कहते हैं कि IMF ने ये वाजे कर दिया था कि वो किसी इंटरम गवर्नमेंट के साथ डील नहीं करना चाहते, वो एक लॉन्ग टर्म ऐसी गवर्नमेंट के साथ डील करना चाहते हैं जो आवाम के वोट से आई हो, जिनके ऊपर आवाम को एतमाद हो। तो इसलिए इलेक्शन हर सूरत पाकिस्तानियों को करवाने पड़ने थे। लेकिन ये जो खुफिया हथियारों की डील हुई इसकी वजह से जो बीच में गारंटीज दी गई और IMF ने बगैर इलेक्शन करवाए हुए जो पूरी अमाउंट रिलीज करने का वादा कर दिया और अमाउंट रिलीज कर दी, इससे पाकिस्तान में एक तो इलेक्शन डिले होने में या करने में बहुत बड़ी मदद मिली। और उसके साथ साथ ये भी कहता है रायन ग्रिम के पाकिस्तान के अंदर जो मौजूदा, मैंने उनसे सवाल पूछा कि जो मौजूदा तशद्दुद है और जिस तरीके से इमरान खान को जेल में डाला हुआ है, जिस तरीके से पाकिस्तान तहरीक इंसाफ के वर्कर्स के ऊपर जुल्म और सितम हो रहा है और पूरी दुनिया में से कोई नहीं बोल रहा ये ह्यूमन राइट्स की जो वायलेशंस हो रही हैं पाकिस्तान के अंदर, जो फ्री ट्रायल नहीं दिया जा रहा, जो अदालतें ज़मानत देती हैं पुलिस दोबारा पकड़ लेती है, औरतों को जेलों में रखा हुआ है, बदतरीन ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस हुई हैं। तो मैंने उनसे ये सवाल पूछा कि क्या ये भी किसी डील का ही फिर अरेंजमेंट है कि दुनिया में कोई इसके बारे में नहीं बोल रहा, जिसके ऊपर रायन ग्रिम ने कहा कि बिल्कुल उनको लगता है कि ये डील का नतीजा है। और उन्होंने इसको बड़ा वाज़े एक्सप्लेन किया कि बिल्कुल जब ये हथियारों की डील हुई और उसके बाद इसके बेनिफिट में पाकिस्तानी रजीम को एक तो पैसा मिला लोन आसान मिला, जो पहले मुश्किल था, IMF जो अड़ा हुआ था वो उनका अड़ा होना निकल गया, और उसके साथ साथ इलेक्शन डिले कराने का भी उनको एक किस्म की अप्रूवल मिल गई, और उसके साथ साथ ये जो ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस हैं इनके ऊपर भी उन्हें नॉड मिल गई, या उन्हें काइंड ऑफ इनडायरेक्ट अप्रूवल ही आप कह लें मिल गई कि कोई उनसे नहीं पूछेगा, और फिर उसके बाद उन्होंने जो कुछ किया वो आपके सामने है। इस स्टोरी का एक और बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट पहलू यह है कि IMF ने लोन देने से पहले इस स्टोरी के मुताबिक 2 शर्तें रखी। एक तो आप एनर्जी प्राइसेस जो हैं वो बढ़ाएंगे, वो डबल करेंगे आप एनर्जी प्राइसेस, और दूसरा आप डॉलर को फ्री फ्लोट में छोड़ेंगे और उसके रेट को कंट्रोल नहीं करेंगे। आपने दोनों चीज़ें फिर होती हुई देख ली। आपने देख लिया कि एनर्जी प्राइस पूरे मुल्क की बाँ निकल गई है, जिस तरीके के बिजली के बिल्स आए हैं, गरीब मारा गया है बिल्कुल, और दूसरी तरफ डॉलर भी किधर पहुंचा है वो भी आपने देख लिया है। तो इससे तो ये लगता है कि पाकिस्तान को खासा कमज़ोर किया गया है, पाकिस्तान खासा कमज़ोर हुआ है इस डील के बाद। फाइनेंशियली भी पाकिस्तान की इकॉनमी भी शैम्बल्स में चली गई है। एक टाइम पैसा तो मिला, लेकिन पाकिस्तान की ओवरऑल इकॉनमी की तबाही कर दी गई है। ये एक बहुत बड़ी स्टोरी है जो इंटरसेप्ट ने की है, और मैं तो ये कहूँगा, जब मैं इस स्टोरी को देखता हूँ तो ये स्टोरी असल में उनकी जो ओरिजिनल स्टोरी है, जो साइफर उन्होंने ट्रांसक्रिप्ट पब्लिश किया था, जिसे गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान ने कहीं पर चैलेंज नहीं किया, और जब चैलेंज नहीं किया तो इसका मतलब मान लिया गया कि वो ट्रांसक्रिप्ट असल था। और उसके साथ साथ उन्होंने, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान ने, मीन शहबाज शरीफ साहब ने BBC को इंटरव्यू देते हुए तकरीबन माना कि वो साइफर का ट्रांसक्रिप्ट ओरिजिनल था। राणा सनाउल्लाह साहब ने भी अपने एक स्टेटमेंट के अंदर माना। तो वो बहुत बड़ी स्टोरी थी जिसमें वो ट्रांसक्रिप्ट उन्होंने पब्लिश कर दिया था। बहुत पूरी दुनिया के लिए बहुत बड़ी एक रिवीलिंग स्टोरी थी। अब जो ये स्टोरी है, जो ये प्रूव कर रही है कि कैसे ये डील हुई, इस डील से कैसे पैसा मिला, और ये डील बाजवा साहब के वक्त में हो चुकी थी, क्योंकि 2022 के अगस्त में पाकिस्तान ने हथियारों की प्रोडक्शन तेज़ कर दी थी, और मई में तो इसका पैसा भी आ चुका था। 2023 में सिर्फ अरेंजमेंट हो रहा था कि ये जो $1 अरब वहाँ से आया है, इसको कहाँ पर कैसे IMF से इसका फ़ायदा लेना है, और उसके साथ साथ फिर इलेक्शन डिले, और उसके साथ साथ फिर तमाम ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस। तो बहुत बड़ी स्टोरी है। अगर साइफर की स्टोरी क्या थी और ये क्या हो रहा है, किस तरह हो रहा है, ये स्टोरी थी, तो फिर जो अभी की स्टोरी है वो हमें बताती है कि ये क्यों हो रहा था, ये सब कुछ क्यों प्लान किया गया था। बड़ी स्टोरी है। आज हमने रायन ग्रिम के साथ, जो एडिटर हैं इंटरसेप्ट के, उनके साथ डिटेल में बातचीत की है। वो बातचीत इंग्लिश में है, आपके सामने रखते हैं। अभी मेरे इस तज्जिए के बाद वो इंटरव्यू आप मुलाहजा करेंगे, और आप उससे खुद ही फिर अंडरस्टैंडिंग अपनी मुरतब कीजिए। मैंने उसमें उनके सोर्स के बारे में भी सवालात पूछे। उन्होंने कहा था कि वो मिलिट्री सर्कल से उनका सोर्स है, तो पूरी कोशिश की मैंने पूछने की कि वो उनका कौन सोर्स है, किस लेवल से है, वो रिटायर्ड मिलिट्री पर्सन है या वो सर्विंग मिलिट्री पर्सन है। तमाम सवालात उनसे बेलाग पूछे गए हैं, उनके उन्होंने बेलाग जवाबात दिए हैं। आपकी खिदमत में हाजिर हैं।
Thank you, and I welcome you, Mr. Ryan, with us today. And for the audience, I just want to say, Mr. Ryan from Intercept, he's editor in Intercept, and he brought in another bombshell story for Pakistanis and rest of the world. His first story was all about Cypher, and he brought in his. He actually published the Intercept published the Cypher, I would say, transcript. And later on, Shahbaz Sharif and other people actually admitted that that was the real copy of the cipher. That was a bombshell story for whole world, that how regime change operation actually worked in Pakistan. But everybody was thinking, what is this a cipher story and why? And we didn't have any answer for why. But that answer was solved again by Intercept and Intercept's team. So we want to talk to Ryan today to understand this why thing which they brought in and made us understand actually their newer story, which is about secret arms deal where Pakistan sold some arms to United States of America, and they shipped them, or they handed that over to Ukraine. But it was a very clear understanding between Pakistan and US that these weapons these arms are actually for Ukraine war. And Pakistan received 1 billion, close to 1 billion US dollars in return, and also a much softer deal from IMF. And also, Pakistan got another huge advantage, current Pakistani regime, of course, not Pakistani people or Pakistan as a country. And we'll discuss that in the later part of this interview. So, Ryan, first of all, I welcome you in this YouTube session with me. And I want you to explain to us in a summarized form what this story is all about, which you brought in, and why this is more important than your original story, which was Cypher.
Right. If the original story of the Cypher was the what, this story I think you could call the why. And so briefly, it lays out the timeline of events that fell into place or were pushed into place after that no confidence vote. So very briefly, what we uncovered is that by the end of the summer of 2022, Pakistan had its operations ramped up and was making significant amounts of artillery shells, munitions, other ammo for the war in Ukraine. They're financed by the United States. At the same time, it was busy negotiating the final tranche of its already existing kind of IMF loan, which was set to expire June 30th of 2023. Throughout the early part of 2023, Pakistani government insisted that everything was on course, nothing to see here, don't worry. By March, the IMF said publicly, no, in fact, Pakistan has to come up with $6 billion in capital commitments in order for this final tranche to come through. They were able to cobble together $4 billion, mostly from Gulf countries, but markets were very clear that it looked like they were going to default, that they were not going to reach the requirements needed, and that by June 30th, the loan would not come through. Instead, there was a surprise announcement made June 29th, 2023, that the IMF would be giving Pakistan $3 billion rather than the $1.1 billion that was expected. What we now know is that in May, the Pakistani ambassador to the United States met with Donald Lu to confirm an agreement that the United States would allow the money that was being spent by the U.S. on weapons from Pakistan for Ukraine to count as this capital commitment, and would secretly convey that information to the IMF. We know that several days after that meeting, the Washington ambassador to Pakistan met with the finance minister, discussed this again, and we know that then just weeks later, the IMF loan came through, which then staved off an economic crisis and also allowed the government then to postpone elections and deepen its crackdown.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And how would you say that this helped them delay the election? How would you explain that? I understand the IMF deal because they have given them a surety about $1 billion, but how will it help about delaying the election?
Because the IMF insists on structural reforms that and oftentimes are going to be painful for the everyday people of that country. The IMF only wants to deal with governments elected with a mandate. And so the IMF does not want to strike a major deal with a caretaker government. And so if they could not strike a deal, then you could not bring in a long-term caretaker government because you would have to have elections produce a government with a mandate, which would then negotiate with the IMF. But if you can ink the deal and make it big enough, then you don't need a government with a mandate because it can just move, technocratically for as long as the money lasts on cruise control.
Interesting. Ryan, you said in the month of May, there was a meeting between Donald Lu and Pakistani ambassador about IMF, and then later on it got mature at the end of June. I have a question. Then it means these arms were delivered much before the month of May. And then, of course, the initial talks about these weapons or arms were even much before that, because after that, the US provided a nod and provided the finances. And then Pakistan started, manufacturing those weapons. And finally, they were delivered, money received. And in the month of May, Donald Lu was talking about the arrangement of that money and IMF program. So it looks like this was happening, maybe, I'm using the word maybe in the regime of General Bajowa.
So if you look at the arms export data, you by August, you've got significant amounts being shipped. We know now was
August
destined
22?
for Ukraine. August 22. So that means that,
interesting.
You can't spin that up overnight. So if that takes a couple of weeks or a couple months, that means that the talks, started at some point late spring or summer of 2022.
Yeah, some point, maybe April, May, after the departure of Prime Minister Imran Khan. Your initial story.
Maybe even before that.
The timeline could. Yeah,
right.
I now there is a more sense about the timeline for me, actually, personally. Go ahead, please.
Right. No, I can see how that would be personally relevant to your own timeline.
Okay, Ryan. My next question is, of course, you have a credible source, and in your initial story, you are very confident about your source, and you are again very confident about this story. And this story is much more bigger in my point of view. And for Pakistani audience, we will definitely translate it in Urdu. Your interview with Urdu subtitles for sure, so that they understand how big this story is, which you brought in yesterday. But I have a question: how confident you are about your source, our documentation, or anything which is based off your cipher story and not this story?
Right, totally confident. Not only have Pakistani government officials, including Shehbaz Sharif, confirmed that the transcript, the substance of the original cipher that we obtained from the source is accurate, but we were able to cross-check the other documents that we got in a variety of ways. One being they're signed by an American brigadier general. We can find that brigadier general's signature on American mortgage documents and match it up and see that it's the same signature. It's just not plausible that could have been fabricated. And you can even match the contract numbers on the document, the Pakistani documents, with contract numbers available in a database through the Pentagon. You can match them with the arms export data from the State Bank of Pakistan. And so there's just zero question in our minds that this information is authentic and accurate. We're not going to publish images of the documents themselves, because those documents often contain clues within them that would lead investigators, toward the source, and our job is to protect the source.
Another question, Ryan, I have for you is, my very close friend, slain journalist Arsh Sharif, once told me that when somebody brings a story to us, any documentation, as a journalist, we are more cautious and careful if story comes to us instead of us going to a story. So definitely you are a very, very, I would say, experienced as well as well-trained journalist with a very reputable background. When this source of you brought in these documents to you is cipher or this story, did you really evaluated all its fact side and its truth side? Because that source could have their own intentions and benefits associated to these stories. So have you gone through that extra cautious measures? I'm sorry, I'm not doubting you, but I'm asking this question so that people who are watching, they need to know the quality of your source, our intention of your source, and of course, if the person is bringing truth, then no matter what that person's intention, if it is all truth, then it is your responsibility. Right. But have you gone through that?
Shehbaz Sharif was a great journalist, and he knows what he's talking about there. You always, if someone is bringing something to you, you want to ask the question of why, who's benefiting, and what the motivation might be here. The additional thing that you have to worry about when you're reporting in the world of kind of foreign relations and intelligence services is the planting of misinformation or disinformation. And so you also have to be very careful that you're not, falling into some trap that that one intelligence service or another you might be trying to set, and you never know, which ones those might be. Might be the Russians, it might be the Ukrainians, might be the Pakistanis, might be the United States, might be you name it. And so you have to be, extraordinarily cautious that that's not going on, as well as kind of individual motives of the particular source. And so you do have to, push this, probe these documents from every different direction, which is one reason, we don't obtain documents and then publish them the next day or the next week. This is a drawn out process that takes twists and turns and requires an extraordinary amount of caution, which we took with these.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Ryan, another question about your source. Of course, you are free to comment or decline. Your source is, you said it's from the military circles. Is this the same source which brought in a cipher?
Yes, this is the same source, which helps us also then to be able to verify these other documents, because we know that that cipher was authentic as well.
The source you think is currently serving in the military, or a retired one?
On that, I will decline to comment, because I don't want to help investigators narrow a search down if they do decide to make a search, which I don't think they should do. I think that this is a source operating, for patriotic reasons. But it's not my decision to make. I would just encourage them not to go hunting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Another question, and you feel free to decline if you want. The source is from a very senior position. When we say the military career, or the mid-level, or a junior position?
Again, yeah, I'm going to have to decline to answer that question for the same reason. Don't want to help them narrow it down.
Okay. Ryan, I also read about your upcoming book, and I'm going to ask about it. But first, I would like to ask one or two more questions to just wrap up this story. First,
Sure.
You brought in this cipher story. And as I said, at that time, we didn't know why this whole thing will really have to be organized and arranged. But after cipher, and now when we see the timeline, I'm not saying that you are saying this, but what you told me, when I put up this timeline together, I see that from your story that in August 2022, Pakistan started producing more arms, or their data shows from your claim. And that means it started a few months earlier. So now the dots are connected pretty well, that why Imran Khan had to leave the office, so that then these all arrangements are being done. But end of the day, you claimed one thing, that Pakistani got delayed in election, which makes sense, because the way you explained the IMF's requirement was to deal with a more stable government, a long-term government, instead of interim government. That is also understandable. But I have a question. Do you think the heavy-handedness on Imran Khan and his party workers, where we have seen a lot of human rights violations, a lot of violations about even Pakistani constitutions and laws and free trials, and putting people in jail and not then letting them go set free by the courts even. Do you think when Pakistani regime was dealing in this secretive arms deal, and because of that they got this lucrative IMF deal, and they also got a nod on delaying the election, do you think it could be on the basis of your information or your analysis? Do you think they also got a nod on, okay, go on, you can fix Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf or Imran Khan the way you want, and even if you violate human rights or basic principles of free trial and fair treatment in the court of law, rule of law, it's okay, we won't really ask you, there is no slap on the wrist?
That does seem to be the signal that was sent. And if you noticed from the State Department podium, the State Department spokesperson, Matt Miller, when Imran Khan was charged and then convicted of that first in that first case that had to do with state gifts that were bought and sold, he said, we consider this to be an internal matter for Pakistan, which is which is the State Department's, not even that thinly veiled diplomatic way of saying, you have permission to go forward with this. He was even pressed by Matt Lee, the AP reporter, on why, say, the U.S. would raise an alarm about Alexei Navalny in Russia, but not Imran Khan here in Pakistan. And Miller said directly, there are cases where we feel like there's not enough evidence and that we need to stand up and say something about it. And we don't feel that that is the case with this one. And so that's why we're saying it's an internal matter. So they were pretty explicit that there was a green light to go forward. Whether that changes and how that changes in the light of the reporting on the State Department's involvement here, remains to be seen.
Yeah, and then both of your stories are telling that Mr. Donald Lu was part of both of your stories. He's an important character in both of your stories, in Cypher as well as this new arms deal, which you are telling. Last question, and then I'll go for your book-related questions, because I'm very interested and intrigued. Personally, believe that was a huge opportunity for American politics and world politics to understand Bernie Sanders' movement. So I'll go. But the last question about your story, would you like to tell me that what is your opinion if you summarize both of the stories, like Cypher and then this new arms deal? As a journalist, of course, I want your opinion. In Pakistan, usually what we do is when we deal with the other powers, and sometimes if we do something with our own will, later on for the public consumption in-house, we say we were under a lot of pressure to make this deal. Former President Musharraf did the same. And later on, the whole attack, our whole, I would say, burden was on the United States of America for doing that. Do you think here, what is your analysis? Pakistan, of course, lost their impartiality in international relations. That is the one thing. From Pakistan's perspective, do you think it was also equal involvement in this story? Like it was no kind of pressure by the US, rather it was the desire of Pakistani regime to sell those weapons or arms. What is your opinion? Of course, you can decline to comment if you want.
Right.
What is your opinion?
My sense is that there was a faction within the military that felt like that a short-term solution to whatever problems they had identified was, tightening the relationship between them and the United States, and that the policy of neutrality between not just between Ukraine and Russia on this particular war, but also balancing relationships between China, Russia, and the United States was not one that was going to be beneficial to those particular factional interests within the military, and so moved with the encouragement of the United States to tighten that arrangement. The U.S. has historically not had room for neutrality. The U.S. sees neutrality as opposition, and Don Lu made that clear when he used the phrase kind of aggressive neutrality, and so that created an opening that the military kind of took advantage of. So I think when I interviewed Imran Khan back in I guess June, he had said that initially he believed it was engineered by the United States, but then later came to believe that the U.S. was kind of tricked into encouraging elements of the military to make this move. I think it's somewhere in between those two different things. There obviously were factions within the military that wanted to make this move, but would they have done it without the United States? And would the United States have done it if they didn't need Pakistan's allegiance on this war? Is a question we don't fully know the answer to, but I think we can venture some educated guesses.
Ryan, I want to know about your book. It's interesting.
Sure.
I read about it. It's about Bernie Sanders, his movement. I don't think it'll be a very happy book at the end,
Right. No.
or a happy story, because there's a lot of stuff which have gone through in that, I would say, concept era or political movement. So tell us a little bit about your book, and when is it coming out?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Throughout my career, I've been covering kind of the left here domestically in the United States, and the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2015 and 2016 was a real break. Almost, he called it a political revolution. It was a real dividing line, within the Democratic Party, and in a lot of ways did reshape the party and galvanized a kind of youth movement that is now, has now grown in strength here in the United States. And the book is called The Squad, AOC and the Hope of a Political Revolution. And AOC is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the four squad, the others being Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley, who were elected in 2018, kind of following the energy of the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign. So the book is about what happened when they came to Washington, tried to change it, were changed by Washington, but kind of neither side kind of comes out the same at the end. So it's a story that hasn't, that continues to unfold. And, I do think they actually shaped the Biden administration's domestic policy and to some degree foreign policy as well, but certainly by no means as much as people had originally hoped for when the so-called political revolution was launched back in 2015. That'll be out December 5th, but it's available now if people are looking for something.
And thank you so very much, Ryan, for sharing it with us. And definitely Pakistani diaspora would be interested to read and know your perspective and know your work more. Thank you so very much once again for working stories about Pakistan. There's a lot been going on in Pakistan, and Pakistani people really want to know the truth. And that is actually the real essence of journalism, when you bring truth and you find that you feel that your readers or your viewers are actually have the I would say prerogative to know the truth. And thank you so very much once again for bringing out truth for us and for your great work. Thank you, Ryan, for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.